Hello, folks. My name is Liz. I am one of the librarians here, adult services librarian. You usually find me working up on the second floor. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't done so already. If you need some water, it's over with the refreshments on the table. If you need the restroom, it's out past the reference desk and turn right. If you have any questions during the program, Patty will be out at the desk and can help you with that. So we might still get a few people trickling in. It's been a rainy evening, but otherwise I'm going to turn it over to Mary.
Thank you very much. Yes, good evening. Can you hear me from this? No. Oh, that's for you. So it's just stage prop for me. Okay, great. My name is Mary Paz, and monthly I host a group called Norwood Conversations. And what we do is we get together and try to talk about issues from different points of view. 2 months ago, we had a seminar like this, or a presentation like this, on Citizens United. And it was very successful. The people who came to it liked it. So I thought I would try it again with something that was more local and more of a hot topic issue right now in Norwood, the override. I do have handouts, like I said, after it's over, if you'd pick them up. And mine is headed, is civil discourse possible? Because I don't know about you, but everything that I've been hearing from on the news and the way people talk about one another and on Facebook has been really ugly. And I started the group actually after Trump was elected, not because, you know, I voted for Trump, which I didn't, but because I was not happy with the way people were talking about one another. The liberals were horrible people. The people who voted for Trump were idiots, you know. And I just, you know, that's not how it goes. I mean, your neighbor didn't all of a sudden turn into a totally different human being just because of the way he or she put an X on a ballot. So what I had hoped to do, and it's difficult to do. I'm not very good at it because I can be very impassioned. And also this being Massachusetts, we're pretty blue, and it's very hard for me to get more conservative people into my meetings. And if we're all liberals, of course you know what we do for an hour and a half, so that's not very productive. But so this to me is a better format, a way to get more people involved with us. So in civil discourse is possible, and what I did was I printed out some quotes from a couple of articles and also some websites you can go to if you want to learn more about it. One person says, civil discourse requires focus, intention, skill, practice, creativity, and effort. It is much about interpersonal relationships and communication as it is about arguing. In fact, it shouldn't be about winning an argument, but rather about engaging in a constructive conversation. And I think that's what we're going to try to do tonight. You know, they're both, Diane and Tom, will be presenting their views, but I've explained to them the purpose is for them to do that, for them to hear one another, ask one another questions, and make sure they understand one another, and for you to do the same thing too. We need to validate each of us as a human being with an opinion, and that's just basically. I mean, I may never agree with anybody who voted for so-and-so, but I respect their position as a human being, you know? So at any rate, let me go ahead and get started with the introductions. That's about who we are, right? I'm gonna start with Tom because he's gonna go first. This is Tom Guiot, and his name is spelled G-U-I-O-D. So I had to listen to his voicemail to make sure I could pronounce his name correctly because I was only introduced to Tom. And it's a wonderful name. It's French-Canadian? French. Yeah. Oh, it's French, okay. Tom has lived in Norwood for 48 years. He's been a town meeting member for 4 years. He and his wife had one child who attended the Norwood schools and now lives in North Attleboro with her husband and 2 kids, a girl age 8 and a boy age 12. Tom says he's not against funding schools and services, but he's rather in the Bob Thornton camp of responsible planning, effective use of financial resources, and consideration of the effect of the substantial amount of the override on taxpayers, especially seniors, citizens, and renters. So that's Tom. So obviously he's going to be talking against the override. And may I introduce Diane O'Toole. Diane and her family bought their first home in Norwood in 1990, and in 98 they moved from Norwood to another house in Norwood, so they stayed in Norwood as their family expanded. She's raised 3 children, and they've all graduated from Norwood High School. She still lives in Norwood and is very active in town issues. She has served as a town meeting member. She was on the initial planning board for Norwood Day and continued to serve on that board for a number of years. She was responsible for a large grant from Ernie Bach Jr. that funded the high school varsity cheerleading team that went to Florida a couple years ago and won, and they got the 3rd best in the nation. Thank you for doing that. And she's served on many study committees at the state and local level for the League of Women Voters. Most recently, she was the chair of the League study about this override. She served for 28 years in many official capacities with the League, and she remains on the board of directors of the Norwood League of Women Voters. So, obviously, Diane's going to be talking in favor of the override. And I am neutral tonight, so I'm just going to be the moderator. And so, Tom, would you like to get started? Sure. All right.
Good evening, everyone. As Mary mentioned, I am in Bob Thornton's camp. For those of you who may not know him, Bob Thornton was the CFO of Norwood from 1979 to 2015, 36 years, and I believe that there is no one more familiar with the budgeting process and financial status of this town. Upon hearing talk of the possible override, he wrote 2 letters to the selectmen, one on December 14, 2018, and one on January 24, 2019, explaining the need for a thorough review of the town's finances and spending, as well as vetting all budget requests before deciding on an override. He provided many ideas on where to postpone or reduce spending and increase revenue. He supplied no less than 12 charts to illustrate his points. He strongly encouraged the town to follow the Committee of 21, aka the C21 process, that solved the funding problems of the public safety building in 1999 to the tune of $13 million, the high school in 2009 to the tune of $40 million, and the Public Works building in 2014 to the tune of $16 million. So where can we evaluate his suggestions? Well, I got a hold of my copy of his memos from Norwood Now. Now, I understand that selectmen eventually made copies available for people to pick up in the town hall. But reading his information prompted me to write letters to the editor and enter discussions on Norwood Now, and now that's why I'm here tonight. I wrote a letter to the editor that's going to be in tomorrow night's edition of Norwood Record, titled, "The Override, Who Was Helped and Who Was Hurt?" I hope it will be published tomorrow. But this presentation contains parts of that letter and also some supplemental information that I've gathered. Certainly, the override is going to help the Norwood schools. Let me be clear. I'm not against funding schools appropriately. And believe me, we understand, those who are against the override, we understand the fears that parents have about their children getting a proper education. But senior citizens and renters also have fears. They have fears about their financial future, and I want to provide some information to you that is not commonly available and has not been available to the public in general. There are seniors who will be able to afford this override. Then there are those who are going to struggle to pay for it. So who will be hurt? Many seniors may lose their homes eventually. We've heard that, but it is a possibility. At the April 11th override presentation at the Senior Center, all but 2 of the 12 or so who asked questions were concerned about the effects of the override on their finances and their standard of living. So on May 7th, the assessor made a presentation to the selectmen. The figures I'm going to use come from that presentation. I have a copy of it right here. It's also available online. My information sheet handout has all the links to all the data that I gathered for this presentation. The assessor showed the tax levy and how much the property taxes are going to be affected in the next 5 years and the next 10 years. Now, what we hear often is that the property tax for the average citizen, the average home in Norwood, is only going to increase by $389 for the first year. The assessor then went to explain that that $389 when you calculate as a percentage, it's actually 8% of the total budget. So every homeowner, regardless of their assessment, is going to receive an 8% increase in their tax. On top of that, there'll be added the 2.5% increase by Proposition 2.5, and then the assessor also stated that the average valuation increase, he calls it new growth increase, for the homes in Norwood is 3.8% per year. So you add all those together, and this is in his report right here, the increase is going to be 11.8% for every taxpayer in Norwood when they get their bills in August if the override passes. Now, they give the that $389 figure as the increase in taxes on the average home in Norwood, which is valued at, the tax bill was going to be $4,930. I believe the assessment of that house was somewhere in the vicinity of $470,000. So the tax bill in 2019 was $4,930. When if the override passes and that increase of 11.8% goes into effect, that same house tax bill for 2020 will be $5,512. Now, the assessor went on to explain, well, what is the long-term effect of the override? According to his charts, in 5 years, property tax bills will be at least 27% higher, assuming that annual 3.8% increase remains the same. I don't think seniors' income is going to be 27% higher in 5 years. In 10 years, the assessor estimates property taxes will be at least 46% higher. How many seniors and even middle-income families will be able to afford those types of taxes? Many senior citizens have Social Security income. They also have small pensions and some savings. Any Social Security cost of living increase they may get is on the average of 1 to 2%. Over the past 10 years, the cost of living increase has averaged 1.36% for seniors receiving Social Security benefits. Let's talk about median household income here in Norwood. The median household income by age group in Norwood is enlightening. If the age of the householder, the primary income earner, is under 25 years old, the median income is $79,844. For householders aged 25 to 44, the median household income by age group in Norwood is $103,543. For householders 45 to 64 years old, the median income is $101,221. Now, if you take all those age groups and average it out, the median income is $87,516. The last group, in households where the householder is 65 or older, the median income is $52,072. That is half of the group that earns the $103,000, which is the 25 to 44-year-olds. So if the valuations which are determined from the previous year's taxes, assessments, exceed the 1.3% the assessor estimates from historical records, seniors are going to fall further behind. My real estate tax bill has gone up an average of 4.04% every year for the past 10 years. So much for the 2.5% limit. Now, I hear people argue that Norwood's real estate taxes are among the lowest surrounding towns, and therefore could be raised. The fiscal 2020 FinCom budget book had a nice chart on page 7 and 8 showing the average annual tax bills for the 21 towns in Norfolk County. Norwood was 19th lowest. Some say that the override will only move us up to 16th lowest in the county. Let's add some perspective to that argument. Norwood also has the 5th lowest average household income among the 21 towns. We have lowest real estate taxes because we have a higher percentage of commercial industrial properties who pay twice the tax rate of residential properties, and residents don't have incomes to support the higher taxes. Something else we have to think about. We have the debt exclusion override coming in 2021 for the new middle school. That school price tag is going to come in at somewhere around $60 million. And that's after the school, after the state aid. That could add an estimated $300 per month to our tax bills for 25 years. It's not a operational override. It's a debt exclusion override, which has a lifetime. The operational override is permanent. It affects our tax bills forever. Now, a lot of people are saying that the override will help our property values. So they'll increase the property values, but at the same time, won't increase in property values increase our real estate taxes? Where does it end? And I want to add that, does anyone really think that seniors who may be compelled to sell their homes would be happier getting a higher price, or would they be happier staying there in the first place, staying in the homes in the first place? Now, it's been said that there's a lot of help for senior citizens in town. My argument is that help is minimal. There's a $500 abatement on senior citizens' taxes. Qualifying income limitation on that is $21,336. If you make more than that, you don't qualify for a $500 rebate. Actually, it's an abatement. However, the federal poverty level is higher than that. It's $22,221 for two people. The state circuit breaker may give you a credit against state income taxes if your Massachusetts property taxes, together with half of your water and sewer bill, exceed 10% of your total Massachusetts income tax. That gets a little bit hard to follow. Let me give you an example. In the case of the home, example home that they use about the increase of the override tax bill, the $4,930 home, and assuming that the annual water and sewer bill was $840, that credit, the circuit breaker credit for seniors, would apply to incomes only below $53,500. Anyone who has income higher than that would not qualify for the circuit breaker. Another program they talk about is the senior work-off program, which allows up to $750 to be earned as a credit to your property tax bills. But the number of openings is limited. Last year, they had 12 openings. The year before that, they had 7 openings. This year, they don't know how many openings they're going to have. The 2010 census listed 6,500 seniors in Norwood. That's 21% of our 30,000 population. There's a good chance there are more seniors now, and that percentage is higher. And how many homes or rent apartments, how many of those seniors that own homes or rent apartments will be subject to a landlord's reaction to higher increase in his property taxes? At least 6,050, because 450 of the 6,500 seniors in Norwood live in Norwood senior housing, so they're not going to be impacted by the override. The waiting list is very long and could get longer as more seniors seek affordable housing. Renters will also be affected when landlords raise rents to cover increase in their property taxes. Anybody have any idea how many apartments as a percentage of the total dwellings in this town we have? 42% of the residences in Norwood are apartments. Now, I also should mention that the commercial, industrial, and personal property taxes, their rate is twice the residential rate. I did a calculation where the average taxpayer with the override tax bill is going to increase by $389 for the year. The average business property taxes are going to increase by $4,000 a year. Now, who do you think is going to pay for those increases in the long run? They're going to just pass the cost on to their customers. That's you. So you're not just going to get the increase in the property taxes, you're going to have to pay an increase in goods and services from the local businesses. So in summary, I'd like to say that the override means higher real estate taxes for homeowners, higher rents for tenants, and higher costs for products and services for everyone. Does it make sense to solve funding problems in several areas of raising property taxes, the highest in the town's history, while taking a substantial part of that revenue from the residents least able to afford it? Thank you for listening.
All right, now we'll hear from Diane.
Good evening. I am the past executive director of the American Nurses Association of Massachusetts, and also I'm currently the executive director of the Global Tracheostomy Collaborative, which is a worldwide nonprofit that promotes best practices for trach patients around the world. The reason I tell you that is because in both positions I've had to develop and pass budgets. And when compared to last year's school department budget, without the override, the school department proposed budget is less than the actual cost to run the Norwood school system. So that would necessitate that dramatic cuts would have to be made. And many of these cuts, in my opinion and in the opinion of others, are simply unacceptable. And this is what's on the line. For the operating budget, $200,000 in software, $255,000 in other, reduction in police force and fire department, snow and ice removal costs would not be sufficient, road repair costs would not be sufficient, infrastructure maintenance and repair would not get done. In terms of the schools, what's on the line is the Willett School closing, 5 elementary school, 1 middle school, and 2 high school teachers gone, loss of middle school and high school clubs and activities. Can you imagine a world with no fine arts, no after-school buses, and additional costs to athletics? And actually, the additional costs to both athletics and the music program are right online on the Norwood School website. And you can see, I have printed out copies of what those costs would be. And the children whose families would not be paying $1,000 to play football were probably the children that would need to have those programs available to them, so they're not hanging out on the street and they're not creating crimes and doing drugs, which are all risks, as we know, for young adults. Since the above would only amount to a savings of $1.7 million, additional cuts would also be needed to be made. Classroom size, unmet mass core requirements, lack of electives, foreign language, so that the foreign language requirements cannot be met for college for our students. After-school activities, 8th grade team, pay-to-play sports, which I mentioned. Title IX issues are involved there, and the town could be subject to lawsuits as a result, which would cost the town more money. Kindergarten at elementary schools would lead to more modulars and overcrowdedness in the elementary schools. The town would be at risk of NEASC accreditation loss and college acceptance. Poor school ratings would equal lower home values, because the first question any realtor knows that people ask when they are looking at homes in a town is, how is the school system? And so, according to town manager Tony Mazzucco's presentation to the Board of Selectmen, the town is projecting a $1.5 million deficit over the next 5 years in general government and $2 million in operational costs for the school department annually. It is not possible to make that deficit up with other kinds of fees, because according to state law, the fee has to be reasonably tied to the cost of the service. So there is not much money to recover through these. Fees on other services will not come close to raising the revenue needed. Norwood has traditionally been a fiscally conservative town, and I've witnessed that year after year as a prior town meeting member. And that's a good thing, right? That we're a fiscally conservative town. However, because we've been a traditionally fiscally conservative town, we have traditionally cut items in the budget and in order to balance the budget. The increase in the needs of students with English as a second language and children with disabilities has also put a strain on the Norwood schools. State-mandated programs for these students have not been properly funded, and so the town has had to bridge that funding gap, and we're not alone. Other cities and towns have had to bridge that funding gap as well. The town of Norwood has been robbing Peter to pay Paul for so long that there is no alternative but to raise the needed funds through a property tax increase such as the override. Our tax rates have been low, as Tom mentioned, and we need this adjustment to ensure the proper town government service and proper town school system operations.
All right, thank you both. Now, let me ask you, Tom and Diane, do you have any questions to ask one another about what what each of you has said? You've addressed the schools mostly, and the what will happen with the programs and the house values and all, and you've talked about it from the point of view of the increase in taxes and how it impacts the seniors. Do you have questions for one? I know I have a question for Tom about his figures, because I also went to the town meeting, and what I read from that chart was after 5 years it would be an 11% increase, and also the 2.5%. From what I understand, and the audience might ask a question too, is the 2.5% cap is a town-wide average, so that some people will be paying less than 2.5% and some more than, but the average cannot exceed that. So that's one thing. But do you have questions? Pardon me?
Do you want me to answer that question now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And then I'm going to open it up to the floor.
No,
Yeah,
you
the
can't.
microphone actually is
It
just
only,
for the
it only
camera.
goes to the camera. There's no speakers
So
here.
turn off your phones, folks.
Project our voices.
Please don't project your voice, yeah.
Yeah, and would you talk louder too? So please, yeah, Tom, if you can address that. And while he's looking for that, if you can think of any questions, and audience start thinking of questions you want to ask us about.
Let me say that these are not my figures. These are the figures of the town assessor. And he gave a presentation to the Board of Selectmen, on May 7th, as a result of a letter that appeared in the Norwood Record from a citizen claiming that the increases due to the override were substantially higher. So he wanted to correct the record. And right here he says that due to what he calls new growth, which is really revaluation, the 2.5% limit, and the cost of the override, it's going to raise the taxes on every property owner 11.8% the first year only. And then every year after that, the increase will be 3.8%. That's 2.5% from the override limit, from the Prop 2.5 limit. And he puts in this 1.3% figure that's been the historical average in new growth, which he also said is revaluations of properties every year. Now, every property gets reevaluated based on the previous year's values. And the values are, what is the market paying for houses, essentially. All right? So I've heard many people say that the limit is 2.5%. The assessor does not agree with them. It's right here in black and white. He says the average increase for every property tax bill is 3.8% on the average over the history of the town. And then you have so he came up with this 27% higher figure after 5 years, because you start with the 11.8% increase, and then you get that additional 3.8% increase every year after that. That compounds into 27% increase over 5 years.
If that's the case, then why do they keep saying 2.5% increase on top of,
to get the town manager and the FinCom to talk to the assessor, because they obviously disagree. Now, he's the assessor. You know, he knows property values and the rules better than anybody, I think, because he's the one that sends out your property tax bills.
How many questions, or should we open it to the audience?
Open to the audience.
I do have a question for Diane, but I'm not sure you can answer it. I am absolutely, I want to say disgusted, disappointed in what's happened. Now, they've known there's been a deficit, operational deficit for years. And the school committee, I've been in town meeting, right, and the school committee is cutting teachers, cutting supplies, right? Why didn't they do anything about it 3 years ago? They could have prevented this disaster 3 years ago if somebody, took a hold of the problem, right, and said, all right, we see this coming. It ain't gonna get any better with age. Every year it's gonna be worse. And sooner or later, we're gonna have to talk about an override. It seemed like there was no planning, no foresight by the people in town to address this before it came to this point, this crisis point. And I fully agree that this is a tragedy, what's going to happen to our schools. Fully agree that it is. And I believe it was totally unnecessary. And I don't mind saying this at all, if the powers that be just listened to Bob Thornton, who had 36 years as a CFO in this town, and took some of his advice, we may not be in this position right now.
I just want to know
Yeah.
where the question is in that.
What's that?
You said you were asking me a question.
I was wondering if you know why it took them this long to come to this point, and didn't plan for it ahead of time, because it's been going on for a long time.
Well, as I mentioned, Norwood traditionally has been a very fiscally conservative town. School committee members, I've seen it over and over, you pointed it out rightly, have been beaten down every time they give their presentations to town meeting, every time they're requesting money. This has gone on for years. That's nothing new. I remember when our 50-year member, Marty McKenna, who we just honored with Martha Calamaria and Mary Ann Kenny, when Marty served on the school board, same situation over and over again. Is that right? That's not right. But it is what happened. And so we are in this situation now. And unfortunately, are we going to continue a bad situation, or are we now going to take steps to remedy that? And that's why I am advocating that we, as a town, take steps to remedy that situation for the good of the overall town. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a town where we're not properly educating our children. I don't want to live in a town where crime is up because we have kids on the street rather than in extracurricular activities. I don't want to live in a town where my property values go down and the people coming into town are lower income housing and other things. It just brings down the community. And that's my big concern for the town of Norwood, where I've lived in Norwood more than I've lived in any other town in my life. So, and raised 3 children here. You want to open it up to questions?
Yes, I'd like to open it up now, and I do want to say that talking about, when the horse has already left the barn kind of thing isn't going to help us going forward. What it will help us with, though, I think, is coming to some kinds of agreement in the town of how we want to proceed going forward. Alrighty, so now let me open it up to questions. Here you go. Just say your name, that would be nice.
I'm Mrs. Callahan. I'm Mrs. Callahan, and I've been asked this question, and so I'll throw it out to you. With all the new construction, apartment buildings going up in this town, don't they bring in sufficient revenue so that this might not have to happen? And that is a hard thing for people to understand. Why not? Why the taxes on these big buildings are not enough?
I think when we get into some specific financial questions like that, my suggestion is that you go to the Norwood Town site or call the town hall. I'm a representative there because I didn't call in fiscal, even though they're both very bright, they're not, you know, in charge of the fiscal aspects of this. I have gone to the town meetings and the budget presentations, and I have heard them say that it is not enough, you know. Sure.
Tom McQuaid, we had a meeting with him about a month or so ago about the override, and asked him a similar question, and that's the Forbes Hill property. They just announced that it was going to be sold for $13 million, and they're going to put these medical facilities and clinics and even some stores fronts and that sort of thing there. And I said, well, that's going to solve our problems, isn't it? He said, unfortunately, believe it or not, that might bring in $200,000 in tax revenues after it's complete. Think about that. You know, that whole facility there, all that land and all the buildings and everything, it's only going to bring in about $200,000 a year in tax revenue. So an apartment building probably brings in a lot less. It all depends on how they evaluate it.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Kate Gio, and I live on Allendale Parkway. And how we found out this information is we were curious. And we called the assessor's office and asked for 10 years' worth of our tax bills. And they sent us a copy. And that's where we saw every year was not 2.5% increase in taxes. It averaged about 4.2%. And again, that's the extra growth. So they keep saying 2.5%, just 2.5%. But in your tax bill, it will actually show you the extra percentage of taxes that you have been paying. So all you have to do is call the assessor's office and ask him, can you send me a copy of 10 years' worth of my tax bill? And you will see it for your own eyes. Thank you.
And I do encourage people to double check on that too.
And I'm sure people are aware of this, but it varies on each home, right? So if you have a home that's worth $200,000 versus a home that's worth $600,000, that rate increase varies. I just wanted to point that out to people.
Right, and like I had said before, it's over the town as an average.
Hi, Ed Ferris. I understand what you're saying about that average in the tax rate. I don't believe you're correct because that is a overall average. The levy limit is a limit. But my question is, you're arguing that some people can't pay for this. I understand that. But you haven't argued about what the alternatives are if we don't. And what I'm seeing is that the town is silently at a tipping point right now. We can either choose to invest in the town or we can choose not to. So my question to you is, why would you not invest in the town? And I do understand the argument about why wasn't this done sooner. I got a great story I can tell you about that, but we can talk about that later. But honestly, I mean, I look at it that way, so I'm torn between both because I do understand the argument, but I'm also looking to the future of the town and where I think we should be going. And yeah, it is a crisis. Nobody wants it, but it's here. So we're either going to deal with it or we're going to walk away from it. What are we going to do?
My answer to that is that there was an alternative. Bob Thornton tried very hard. I'm sorry, yeah. There was an alternative. And Bob Thornton tried very hard to convince people that they didn't have to go to the override as quickly as they did. He successfully negotiated the debt exclusion overrides for the public safety building, for the DPW garages, and for the high school. So he knows how to move money around and delay expenses, and he claims in his memos that he could have come up good possibility of $4 million deficit in the budget, school budget, by just being a little more proactive starting in December and getting a committee of 21 together, just like they did for those other big projects, and at least reviewing all the budget requests and all the revenues coming in, and there could have been an alternative to this override. That's what I'm saying, and I fully agree that the town needs money to fund all the important things that we all enjoy here. And we've been very lucky. We've had tremendous services, great school system for low taxes, and that wasn't going to go on forever. Bob Thornton volunteered to help.
Can I,
Yeah.
can I make a
Sure.
comment to that? Thank you. The Budget Balancing Committee, FinCom, the school committee, the town manager's office, all reviewed the budget information and all agreed, and the Board of Selectmen, all agreed that this override was necessary. I haven't seen in the many years that I was a town meeting member, all of those boards agree to anything, all to the same thing. I just wanted to mention that.
So you keep bringing up Mr. Thornton. And I've actually heard from him since 2002. I have read his budgets. I have seen him. You know, I have listened to him. And I saw his letter. And the big problem I have with Mr. Thornton in general is, you said, how did this come to this event? Honestly, I believe he's the reason. He is completely the reason that we are stuck in the situation we are now. Mr. Thornton has been advocating for years and years and years this concept of deficit spending, in which we take our free cash and we take whatever comes back and we immediately roll it back into the budget. And we've been doing that year after year after year to diminishing and diminishing returns, okay? I mean, it really started in 2004 when the first cuts were proposed in the school system, and Jim Hayden, superintendent at the time, loved the man, very, very nice, has no concept of how to present a good story or explain what's going on. You know, we had crisis, and that's where all the crises start, because you remember, oh, they find it every year. Oh, we're going to be cutting this. Oh, we found the money. Oh, we're going to be cutting this. Oh, we found the money. Well, you know something? They did find the money. Because in talking to FinCom, because it was only FinCom at the time, and they had to balance the budget with what they have, and Mr. Thornton was proposing, okay, we know we're going to get this back, and we know we're going to get this back, and we're going to spend it all, which they've been doing, spending it all, and we haven't been saving any of it, except for what town meeting specifically votes into the emergency fund, which, by the way, you should know, we've only started voting back money into the emergency fund over the past 4 years, because it was pretty much depleted 6 years ago. And the emergency fund, let's keep in mind, is only $5 million. On our budget, $5 million. That's not even 1%. That's not enough to save anything, even if we had all of it. And even if we wanted to use it by law, we can't use it unless it's an emergency. So I actually propose to you that where you're using Mr. Thornton as a guide, you may want to rethink what he's proposing, because from everything I've read, free cash is meant to be a town's savings. It's meant to be what you put away, and it's meant to be what you save, and it's meant to be what you put, you know, aside or just spend at a one-time shot for capital expenditures, not what you balance your budget with. And we've been doing that for years and years. So that's the only thing I would say to that whole line of thought.
Yes, Mrs. Callahan.
Okay, Mrs. Callahan. You keep mentioning Mr. Thornton in a past tense, so I'm assuming whatever he suggested was in the past tense, and that's something we can't deal with right now. You used a very good word, investing in the town. I would like to transfer that word into investing in the future for our children. Our children are our future. And without a good education, we're going down the drain. We're already going down the drain in many other areas, but we need to have the children educated so that those that have the ability to go out there and help this country should have the opportunity. And that means an override.
Any questions?
I just want to make a comment on, my name is Tony Esco, and I speak from a point of view as someone that was on school committee from 2001 to 2008. I also speak as someone that was on the Abrams study, a so-called Committee of 21 that Tom supports, and I have their report from 5.5 years ago. And overall, by the way, the report was to study the schools. And we actually had a $30,000 contract that former manager town, John Carroll, supported that we hire someone, and the town engaged in a contract with the Abrams group. And the schools got a very good report. There were challenges, though. Most of them stemmed from money. You could not follow through on a district improvement plan if you don't have the staff, if you don't have the curriculum supplies, or the assessment tools. We struggled with a accounting system that didn't match the data that the school department needs to supply to the Department of Ed did not integrate well with the system that the town uses, and we finally just funded, it's over $1 million. Those of you who are the town meeting members know, they're just now, we're getting one where the schools and the towns will be more compatible on a similar program. They didn't even have the software where they were compatible with each other. But to say that this all of a sudden happened is not true. I can tell you that really things with the schools changed dramatically. If you go back to 1993-94, everybody's familiar with the term education reform. It was actually passed as a piece of emergency legislation, and its real name is the Educational Excellence and Accountability Act. And school funding would never be the same, and it hasn't. One of the other things that happened when that passed was the collection of so much student data you cannot believe. And the unfortunate sidetrack of that was now all this data and all these MCAS scores and everything are on websites. And now towns compete with others because people can go look at that information. And it has this double-edged sword where information is good, but you need to have a very educated, well-informed point of view when you read and interpret that data. It's really not apples to apples when you compare towns that way. And you have to look at your demographics, town demographics, but very importantly, your student profile and who we are. And who we are is a complex and diverse town. And you've heard it before that our schools have a higher compilation of students when you aggregate our English language learners, our special needs students, and our what used to be called low income is economically challenged students. And when you add those up, we have a high needs student population. Education is a people business. These are not canned goods. These are children, and they're presenting with a variety of great needs. And social emotional needs are huge. That includes the autism spectrum, but it also includes behavioral issues. If you happen to read the Globe on Sundays, I'm still a paper person, and in the Globe local section, there was information about Norwood's going to have an override vote in a week, and at the top of the page, it listed that Hull is cutting so many teachers because they're not running an override for their schools, and they have to cut so many teachers. And although they have so many less students, they're presenting with such emotional needs, and they need to address them. We need the English language learner teachers in every school. We need more counselors in every school. We need to keep our children in school and highly motivated. You don't want them to drop out. If you don't provide a good education, you'll pay for it later in society. You can be guaranteed you'll pay way more than you are now. And children, too, the schools are responsible for children starting at age 3. So children that present with severe medical needs and other challenges who are now saved by the wonderful medical technology, preemie babies, drug babies, all sorts of situations, once they turn 3, they enter into the Norwood Public Schools from ages 3 to 23. Then you age out. And public schools have many variety of children. It's not like parochial or private schools where there's an entrance exam to come in, and automatically we know you're smart. You passed an exam to get in. We need to make sure that our schools can take care of everyone. And we have to provide for the children that need it, the social emotional needs, the English language learners, the economically challenged. We need to make sure that we offer AP courses, that we staff all those science labs in our new high school, that we offer 3 foreign languages as a student graduation component, because that's what the colleges want. The other thing that's not discussed here enough is all the state-funded mandates. When my kids went to school, I didn't pay for the bus. We had subsidized private music lessons after school. I didn't pay for a marching band and winter percussion and tennis. I didn't pay for any of that. I'll tell you who's suffering. Families. You want to talk about the real struggle? Talk to families. Talk to parents with children. They're on fixed income too. Everybody's on a fixed income. Everybody makes a finite amount of money. Now, nobody makes an income called infinity. We're all on fixed incomes. And parents are paying a 4-digit figure. Not only will they pay for the override, either in their property tax or rent elevation, they pay for a 4-digit amount of private payments for all their children's activities and the bus. And when I was on school committee after 9/11 in 2001, the bottom fell out of a lot of budgets, and pass the buck. Norwood, up until that time, used to get what was called transportation reimbursement. It was a 6-digit figure, upwards of 140, 150 grand. State got rid of it. They didn't get rid of the state mandate that you must bus children within a certain number of miles, but they took away the money. And they do that constantly. You want to complain about the override? Complain to your officials in the State House. That's where your voice should be heard. Special education, I absolutely support that we need to fund special education. I agree with the law. It has never been fully funded since it was passed. I agree with the Educational Excellence and Accountability Act, with a system and a series of tests starting all the way in the low elementary grades now. Not just one test at the end of the year, but a system to follow children's progression and see where their needs lie. I agree with that. And in the beginning, when MCAS came out, there were MCAS grants. Those have been pulled out. It used to be if you got a child in school, in high school, that might have come at the beginning of sophomore year, they weren't required to take the MCAS test. I believe it was 3 years. This is going back at the beginning. Yeah, 3 years. Forget it. Now, after 1 year, you got to take the MCAS test. We need to teach the kids English. How do you think their marks are going to be if they don't understand English? And so we do all we can to promote the early childhood programs. We have the Little Mustangs now starting at age 2, and we have the preschool, and there are peer models, and the peer models pay a market rate for preschool. So I just want to say that this didn't all of a sudden happen. This committee at 21, almost 6 years ago, they used to kid around and say, oh, that committee that's studying the schools, they nicknamed it the Override Committee. Well, you know what? That was 6 years ago. And I agree with the point of the diminishing returns. One of my majors was economics. And on a graph, there is a thing called the point of diminishing returns. You can also call it you're too good for your own good, and you're not reaping the rewards of your low taxes anymore. So 80% of that overrides for the schools, and I totally support it. And I can't imagine putting 3,500 kids out in the street after school with nothing to do.
Thank you. Let me try to get someone else.
One point of information.
What's that?
$2,285. 3 kids in school with fees for buses, sports, and music. $2,285. I did it for 6 years until my son graduated, and then it started to go down.
Somebody else.
I just want to make a couple of comments. Bob Donnelly. I'm a town meeting member and member of the Finance Commission. I ran in 2017, and one of the reasons I ran was because I was frustrated with the way our budgets were turning out the last several years. They were highly dependent upon finding of sources of money that were not reoccurring every year. What I mean is we were very dependent on unspent money from different accounts, our free cash accounts, to fund ongoing operating expenses. So what FinCom advocated for and the Budget Balancing Committee also agreed to was, let's do a 5-year plan of our financial expenses and our revenue projections. Let's see where we are year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. And the story that told us was that not only do we have a deficit currently in the FY 2020, but we have a deficit year in, year out to the tune of almost $30 million over a 5-year period. So what that says is that if the services you get in FY19, our current year, we can't afford them next year. Without any changes, we can't afford them. In FY21, more changes. So FY20, without the override, we're going to be seeing dramatic cuts in school services. FY21, we're going to see them in the town services. So this is going to be a compounding effect on us. So this committee of Budget Balancing Committee voted unanimously for this override. 2 members of your FinCom, 2 members of your school committee, 2 members from your selectmen board, plus officials from the town manager's office and the school department. Unanimous, no disagreement. They spent 8 months looking at this issue. They spent 8 months looking at revenue projections. They spent 8 months putting together information. So there was planning done here. It's just that we are at a point now where the tools that we used financially to get us through a fiscal year are no longer effective. And I would also just add that I read Mr. Thornton's letter. Mr. Thornton is a very thoughtful man, but I did read his last letter, and that letter had revenue generation ideas in it. So there is a recognition by even Mr. Thornton that we are at a point where we need revenues, and he has suggested a trash fee, which is a fee that would be assessed to owners of property, residential properties only. So our owners of industrial properties, our owners of commercial properties would not contribute to that structure because they do not get trash pickup and recycling pickup from us. So it's a tax. It really is a tax on the residential owner only, and it's not a burden that is shared equally across the town. So really the best way of generating revenue on an ongoing basis that is fair to all property owners, residential, industrial, and commercial, is to increase the tax levy. And just one other thing, when we say a 2.5% increase, that does not mean your individual taxes go up by 2.5%. It is a levy. The levy that we assess taxes at the previous year can only increase by 2.5%. How that new levy is distributed can vary. Some will pay, and we add the new growth in there, and there's other factors that are added in there. So no one, it's going to vary. You can't say that it's just a 2.5% increase because it's distributed very differently, and it really is applicable to the tax levy limit, not individual taxes on homes.
Hi, I'm Ken Roberts. You both make great arguments, by the way, on your positions, and some of the comments here are terrific. I have a comment or a question for Tom, actually. I thought your presentation you did a lot of homework. You did a ton of homework, and I'd be interested if that, all your notes or whatever it is, if that's available online for the rest of us to look at. It was just too much to take all in one fell swoop. There is a reduced.
Oh, Tom, what about your websites here?
Yeah, that's where I got the data from. I'll be glad to send you a copy of it.
Would you really?
I made tonight.
Because you'd be doing yourself a great disservice if you didn't, with all the time you put to get it together, to make it more available to.
And like I said, he does have the websites here in this handout that you can pick up before you leave. That, the Norwood Town ones where you can access a lot of this information.
Okay, great.
And I do ask you to trust it because, like I said, my understanding is different than as we've heard, so I
My
encourage you to
email
fill
address
out
at the top of that, just send me an email.
On top of that correspondence?
Yep. You just send me an email and I will send you a copy of my presentation.
A lot of time, thank you.
Right. Anybody else that you can hand up? Thank you.
Hi, Mary Coughlin. I have a question, and I just want to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. I've been reading a lot on Facebook about it. My questions that struck me was like when they said $1,000 or $1,200 for each football player, and I'm wondering if there's like 50 kids on the football team, That's $50,000. And I was wondering, is there any way of finding out how that money is going to be spent, what it's allocated for? The track team, $627 per child. That's a lot of money coming in, and we're not getting a breakdown for what, you know?
Well, you can.
If you go on the Norwood School website, it lists all the budgets either without the override, what the school committee would request if there were an override, and it breaks it down in aggregate as well as line item by line item. So you can find the nitty-gritty detail there. How much is budgeted for all of the different line item categories? Because I was on there and I was looking at it all, but I wanted to find out certain information for the presentation, and it's all there.
Without a breakdown, it's like, where's all
There's
this
a
money
breakdown.
going?
Yes, that question was asked at town meeting, and those figures include salaries for the coaches, you know, and equipment, and travel, and so it's very well broken down, but somebody asked that question at town meeting, and that, you know, that's what happens.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'd just like to say that this is the first time I have ever seen our town officials under the Budget Balancing Committee work together and come up with a long-range plan that maybe would solve these problems. And I studied the whole issue, and I know that the schools are doing the best they can, and all the people that run our town are volunteers. They're not experts in everything, but they're trying to set up a system where this wouldn't happen anymore, where we could try to solve the problem. And I think maybe we have to give them that chance. And you know, I live on a fixed income too, and I'm old enough to know and feel so bad for all the people. But then I feel bad for the students too. And if this is a way that we can give them a benefit of the doubt and see if they can't solve this problem so we can be this town that we have been, then I think maybe we ought to think about that and give them a chance.
Thank you. I think we can all tell that both of these individuals have Norwood's best interest at heart. They both love the town. They've lived here a long time. They both have different approaches on how things should be done. And again, I encourage you both to double check their figures. You know, this is a presentation, but that doesn't mean this is all written in stone. Check Diane's. Go to the school website. Check out their budget. Check Tom's. Go, you know, call the assessor's office. Find that out. I mean, I know for one, I'm going to, because in my head, having gone to the different budget planning meetings and the town meetings, I have a different idea of what those figures are. So I will do that. And I encourage you all. We're not here tonight to try to sell positions, but to listen to one another and hear that these are two very good people with very different ideas, and but both with a great love of the town. Sure.
The people living in the senior housing in Norwood, is their rent going to go up? No. Yes.
Oh. I should have brought my roller skates. Then I got to falling down and every could laugh.
Carol McClay. I think their rent is based on their income. And the senior housing, I think, is mostly federal housing, so it wouldn't be Norwood anyway.
If there aren't any more questions, I invite you all to come up and get a snack, something to drink, and talk to Diane and Tom one-on-one. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have asked. Do you want to make closing comments, both of you? Here you go. Tom, you first.
Yes, I'd like to thank, driving around town and seeing all the signs and witnessing the results of the town meeting a week ago Monday. I'd like to thank everybody because I'm somewhat of a history buff, military history in particular, and I can say with certainty that I now have a good idea of how General Armstrong Custer felt at Little Bighorn. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out and for listening to both of us. And I had just mentioned to Tom what a well-educated audience we have in the room.
And thank you very much. So come in, Nosh. Oh, and a hand for our two speakers, please.